She took the house I built. She took the kids I loved. She even took the business I bled for, Mike's Garage. They thought I was broken, a washed-up mechanic with nothing left but grease under his nails. They were about to find out that even a dead engine can roar back to life. My name is Mike Davis. If you're watching this, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're watching from. It helps more than you know, because a few months ago, I thought my story was over. Let me back up and tell you how a single signature destroyed 15 years of my life. It started in a courtroom. The air felt heavy, stale. It smelled like old wood and expensive cologne. I sat at a cheap table, my hands clenched tight. My knuckles were white. My hands were built for fixing engines, not for this. I was watching a man I didn't know decide my future, and he looked bored. The judge shuffled papers. He barely glanced at me. To him, I was just another case number, another broken marriage, another Tuesday. He cleared his throat. The silence in the room stretched. I could hear the buzzing of the fluorescent lights overhead. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Then he spoke. His voice was flat, monotone. Marriage dissolved, he said. He didn't pause. Assets divided as per the mediated settlement. He stamped a paper. The sound was loud, final. It didn't sound like justice. It sounded like a gunshot. I looked across the room at Jessica, my wife of 15 years, soon to be my ex-wife. She wasn't crying. She wasn't upset. She wasn't even looking at me. She was looking at her lawyer, Mr. Harrison, and she was smiling. Harrison was a shark in a $1,000 suit, silver hair, perfect teeth, the kind of guy who smiles while he rips your throat out. He was the kind of lawyer who promised you the world. Apparently, Jessica deserved my world. The mediated settlement was a joke. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a surrender. I was exhausted, emotionally broken, financially drained. My own lawyer, a tired public defender named Mr. Chen, urged me to sign. "It's the best you're going to get, Mike," Chen had told me, his voice weary. "If we go to trial, Harrison will eat you alive. He plays dirty." So I signed. I gave up. I thought I was saving what little I had left. I was wrong. The judge kept reading. Then came the words that hollowed me out, the ones that really mattered. Primary physical custody of the minor children, Tyler and Chloe, awarded to Mrs. Jessica Davis. My kids, Tyler, my 11-year-old shadow, Chloe, my 8-year-old sunshine girl, gone. Just like that. I was granted supervised visitation. Every other Saturday. Like I was some kind of danger. Some kind of criminal. My throat tightened. I couldn't breathe. I felt the room spinning. But that wasn't the worst part. The deepest cut was still waiting. Regarding the business, Mike's Garage, the judge continued. He adjusted his glasses. It is ordered liquidated. Assets sold. Liquidated. Assets sold. Liquidated. A fancy word for destroyed. Profit split 60-40. In favor of Mrs. Davis. The gavel came down. Sharp. Final. 15 years of sweat, grease, and late nights, wiped out in 5 minutes. I walked out of the courthouse with the clothes on my back and a box of old photos. That was it. Everything I had left of my life. As I stood on the sidewalk, the sun felt too bright, too harsh. I watched Jessica slide into Harrison's shiny black sedan. They were laughing. They didn't just take my things. They took my name. They took my dignity. And they drove away smiling. My new home was a nightmare. A tiny one-bedroom apartment above a 24-hour laundromat. The floorboards vibrated constantly. The whole place smelled like bleach and cheap detergent. It seeped through the walls. I was used to the smell of oil and gasoline, the sound of roaring engines, the music of a busy shop. Now I lived in a box that rattled all night. The first few weeks were a blur, numbness. I sat on a sagging couch that came with the apartment and stared at the water stains on the ceiling. Who was I now? Mike Davis, the business owner. The father? That man was gone. I was just a shell, a ghost in a cheap apartment. And the silence was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. The liquidation happened fast, too fast. It felt predatory. An auction company came in. A man named Gary supervised the process. Cold eyes, efficient hands. He tagged everything I owned. My tools, the lifts montage, the diagnostic equipment I spent years saving for. He treated it like junk. I went down there the day of the auction. I had to. It was like watching a funeral. My funeral. I saw Tony, my lead mechanic. He'd been with me since the beginning. Loyal, hard-working. He had a young family. He was standing by the gate, holding a small toolbox. His face was grim. "Tony," I called out. He turned. He looked tired, defeated. "Hey, boss," he said, but the words sounded hollow. "I'm so sorry, Tony," I said, the words feeling useless. "I tried to make sure everyone got paid." "We did," Tony nodded, "but the new management, they cleared house, said we weren't cost-effective." He pointed across the street. Harrison's black sedan was parked there, watching. "That guy," Tony spat. "He was here the whole time, smirking, like he won the lottery." It felt wrong. It felt like a robbery in broad daylight. But what could I do? The law was on their side. They sold it all. Pennies on the dollar. My final check, my 40% share, was pathetic. It barely covered the outstanding debts. I was officially unemployed, broke, and completely alone. The realization hit me hard. I had nothing left. Absolutely nothing. The hardest part was the visits. My first supervised visit with Tyler and Chloe was 2 weeks later. We met in a sterile room at Family Services. Plastic chairs? Mismatched toys? It smelled like disinfectant and sadness. It felt like a prison visiting room. They walked in holding Jessica's hands. They looked small, uncertain. The tension in the room was immediate, thick, suffocating. A social worker, a stern woman named Mrs. Gable, sat in the corner, taking notes, watching me, judging me. I tried to smile. It felt fake. "Hey guys, I missed you." Chloe, my sunshine girl, wouldn't look at me. Her eyes stayed glued to the floor. She was holding a new doll, an expensive one. Tyler stood stiffly. He usually talked non-stop about soccer or cars. Now he just shrugged when I asked about school. The silence stretched. I didn't recognize my own children, and they didn't seem to recognize me. Then Tyler spoke. His voice was quiet. "We got a new car," he said, staring at his shoes. "Oh yeah?" I asked, trying to sound interested. "Mom said it's a Lexus. It's way nicer than your old truck." "My old truck, the one we used to take fishing, the one he pretended to drive in the driveway." My stomach twisted. That's great, buddy." The words tasted like ash. Chloe whispered something next. I had to lean in to hear her. "Mom said we're going to Disney World." Disney World. The trip we had always planned. The trip I was saving for. She finally looked up. Her eyes were accusing. Cold. "She said we couldn't afford it before," Chloe said. Her voice small but sharp. "Because you spent all the money on the garage." The garage. The place that paid for their clothes, their food, the house they lived in, the very doll she was holding. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Jessica had poisoned them against me. She had rewritten our history. "That's not true," I started. But Mrs. Gable cleared her throat loudly. A warning. No confrontations. I had to sit there and take it. I had to let them believe the lies. "Your dad loves you very much," I told them, my voice cracking. "Don't ever forget that." They just stared. Blank faces. In their eyes, I wasn't their dad anymore. I was the reason they were poor. I was the failure. Mrs. Gable announced time was up. The hour had felt like a lifetime. I hugged them, but they were stiff, cold. They didn't hug back. I walked out of that center feeling lower than I ever thought possible. I thought the divorce was rock bottom. I was wrong. I needed a job. Fast. Rent was due. I found one at Quick Lube Express. A chain garage. They prioritized speed over quality. It was humiliating. I went from being the boss, the guy everyone respected, the best mechanic in town. Now, I was the new guy. Changing tires and wiper blades. Minimum wage. The manager was a kid named Kyle. Barely 20. He had acne and a superiority complex. He treated me like I was stupid. "Hey, old man, speed it up," Kyle snapped one afternoon, checking his phone. "We got quotas. Bay 3 is waiting." Old man. I was 45. I bit my tongue. I needed the money. I needed to survive. But every oil change, every tire rotation, felt like another nail in my coffin. I was drowning, and nobody was throwing me a rope, and the hits just kept coming. One afternoon, I was walking home from work. My uniform was stained. My back ached. I saw a familiar car parked outside the diner. A vintage Mustang. It belonged to Stan. Old man Stan. He'd been bringing his cars to me since I first opened the garage. I walked in. Stan was sitting in a booth, nursing a cup of coffee. "Stan?" He looked up. His eyes narrowed. "Mike? Is that you? He looked at my uniform. The Quick Lube logo. His expression shifted. It wasn't pity. It was disappointment. Heard you lost the shop, Stan said. His voice gruff. Yeah, it's complicated. Seems simple enough, Stan said, shaking his head. You let them take it. A man doesn't let someone take what's his without a fight. He went back to his coffee. He didn't say goodbye. The respect I had earned over 15 years. Gone. Even old man Stan thought I was weak. Maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't fight hard enough. A few days later, I was wrestling with a stubborn oil filter at Quick Lube. Grease covered my hands. My phone buzzed. Bank alert. My checking account was overdrawn. The only account I had left. My heart pounded. Fear. Panic. I checked the app, my hands shaking. A charge for $400. Labella Salon. $400. For a haircut. It was from the joint credit card, the one I was positive Harrison had closed during the settlement. He assured me it was closed. Another lie, another calculated move to keep me down. I called Jessica. I was furious. The numbness was wearing off. Anger was taking its place. Hot, burning. Jessica, what is this charge? I demanded, gripping the phone. Hello to you too, Mike, she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. $400 at a salon? I yelled, ignoring Kyle, who was watching me from the office. You're still using the joint card. Keep your voice down, Mike. You're causing a scene. I can't afford this, Jessica. I'm barely making rent. The card was supposed to be closed. It was an emergency, she said dismissively, like I was bothering her. An emergency haircut. Are you kidding me? Chloe needed her hair done for school pictures, she snapped. She needed to look nice. Something you clearly don't care about anymore. She was twisting the knife, using the kids as weapons. And frankly, Mike, she continued, her voice turning cold, it's your responsibility. My responsibility? I have nothing left, Jessica. The decree says you're responsible for any outstanding joint debt, she recited, sounding like Harrison. Read the fine print, Harrison made sure of it. She hung up, just like that. The click was loud, deliberate. She wasn't just moving on. She was trying to break me, to grind me into the dirt, to remind me that even now I was still paying for her lifestyle. And the worst part? It was working. I felt the last shred of my hope dying. That evening, I tried to call Tyler and Chloe. It was my scheduled time, 7:30 p.m., written right into the custody agreement. I needed to hear their voices. I needed something to hold on to. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. Finally, Jessica picked up. Hello? Her voice was sharp, hostile. It's Mike. I'm calling to say goodnight to the kids. Silence. I could hear the TV in the background. Laughter. They were awake. Oh, they were already asleep, she said dismissively. It was a long day. A blatant lie. It's 7:30, Jessica, I said, gripping the phone. My voice was shaking with rage. It's my time. Put them on the phone. I said they are asleep, Mike, she snapped. Don't push me. Jessica, I have a right to talk to them. You have the rights I allow you to have, she spat. Her voice was venomous. Don't make this difficult, or I'll have Harrison call you about harassment. Harassment. Talking to my own children was harassment. The line went dead. Sat in the silence of my apartment. The hum of the laundromat below was suddenly deafening. This was it. Rock bottom. The isolation was complete. She had built a wall between me and my children, brick by painful brick. I had never felt so utterly alone. I realized I couldn't go on like this. Something had to change. I couldn't let her erase me. I called my older brother John. He was an accountant. Smart, precise, meticulous, the opposite of me. He always saw the details I missed. He was the only family I had left. We met at a small diner, the Rusty Spoon. John was already there, stirring his coffee. Exactly 5 times. He looked up when I walked in. His face softened with concern. You look terrible, Mike, he said gently. I'm drowning, John, I admitted, sliding into the booth. My eyes burned. I hadn't slept in days. I don't know how this happened. I worked so hard. I gave her everything. I told him everything. The visits. The kids being cold. The Quick Lube job. Stan's disappointment. The credit card. The blocked phone calls. Jessica always liked nice things, John said gently. And lawyers like Harrison, they know how to play the game. They paint the picture the judge wants to see. The overworked husband, the neglected wife. He didn't blame me, but he didn't offer false hope either. But the garage, John, I said. The wound was still fresh, bleeding. The liquidation, it happened so fast. And the valuation, it seemed low, really low. Tony's words echoed in my mind, smirking, like he won the lottery. John nodded slowly. It was low, but they claimed the market was bad. That the business had too much debt. My lawyer Chen, he didn't fight it, I whispered. I know, I slumped back in the booth. Defeat washed over me. It was over. I had lost. Then John leaned forward. His eyes were sharp, focused. Mike, he said, bring me all your paperwork. Everything from the divorce, the settlement, the asset lists, the business valuation. Everything. Why? I asked. It's done, John. The judge signed off. Humor me, John said, his voice firm. I probably can't change anything, but I want to understand how Harrison structured this. He paused. He's aggressive, but sometimes aggressive lawyers get sloppy. Sloppy. Harrison didn't seem like the type to get sloppy, but I agreed. What else did I have to lose? The next Thursday, I brought a bulging folder to the diner. It was everything. The whole ugly history of my failure. I handed it to John. He put on his reading glasses. He started flipping through the pages. I just drank my coffee. Black, bitter. He spent hours analyzing the documents, comparing numbers, making notes. He didn't talk much, just made small noises. Interesting. I watched him work, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was like a detective, examining a crime scene. And this was a crime scene. The murder of my life. If this story is keeping you hooked, drop a like. It means a lot. Because what happened next? It changed everything. After a long time, John stopped. He was looking at the business valuation section. This privatization document, section 3.b, he murmured, pulling out a few more pages. What is it? I asked, not really caring. It's the way they valued the garage, Mike, John said, his voice slow. It's very unconventional. My heart started to beat a little faster. Just a flicker of hope. Unconventional. How bad unconventional? Maybe not, John said, tapping the page. They included the land the garage sits on in the valuation of the business. Yeah, I own the land. Owned it, I corrected myself. It hurt to say that. Right. But Mike, John looked up, his eyes intense. When did you acquire the land itself? I had to think. It felt like a lifetime ago. A long time ago. It was my grandfather's, Grandpa Joe. He left it to me when he died. When was that? John pressed. 20 years ago, before I even met Jessica. It was just an empty lot back then. Weeds and dirt. John's eyes widened. He leaned across the table. You inherited it? Before the marriage? Yeah. The garage was built later. 5 years later. After we were married. I used savings and a small business loan to build it. John leaned back. A slow smile spread across his face. The smile I hadn't seen in months. Mike, he said, his voice trembling slightly. If you inherited that land before the marriage, it's separate property. It's not a marital asset. I didn't understand. I was a mechanic, not a lawyer. But the garage was built on it during the marriage, I argued. Harrison said that made it marital property. Commingled. The building, yes, John explained, his voice rising with excitement. He was talking fast now. The improvements, the business itself, that's marital. He tapped the paper. But the land itself, the underlying value of the dirt, that's yours. Unless, John added, his smile faltering slightly, unless you formally transferred the deed into the business name, or added Jessica's name to the deed. No, the answer was instant. Certain. I never did that. It was always just the land, Grandpa Joe's land. I never thought about it. It was just where the garage sat. Mike, this changes everything, John said, grabbing my arm. I've checked the property records online while we were sitting here. The deed is still in your name only. Michael A. Davis. It was never commingled. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. The land was valuable. Prime location. Right off the highway. At least half the value of the garage was the land itself. Maybe more. When they valued the garage, they included the land, John continued, laying it out. But Jessica had no legal claim to it. The liquidation order was based on a flawed valuation. He spelled it out for me. Simple. Clear. They forced you to sell property that was legally yours. And then they gave Jessica 60% of the proceeds from your inheritance. They stole from me, I whispered. The enormity of the deception sinking in. It was cold. Calculated. Essentially, yes, John confirmed. Harrison either made a colossal mistake, or he let the thought hang in the air. Or he did it on purpose. He knew, I said, thinking back to the courtroom, the smirk. Tony, seeing him watching the auction, he knew, and he hoped I wouldn't notice. My lawyer, Chen, he didn't even look. A spark ignited in my chest. Hot. Fierce. It felt good. It felt alive. It was the first time in months I felt something other than despair. It was anger. What do we do now? I asked. My voice was firm, stronger. Now, John said, pulling out a business card, we need a real lawyer. The card read, Sarah Jenkins, attorney at law, specializing in complex asset recovery. She's a pit bull, Mike, John said, grinning. Smart, aggressive, and she hates lawyers like Harrison. I know her from a few cases. I already called her. She's agreed to meet us. Tomorrow, we were finally going to fight back. We met Sarah Jenkins the next day. Her office was small but modern, clean, efficient, a sharp contrast to the cluttered mess of my public defender's office. Sarah was young, maybe late 30s, but her eyes were sharp, focused. She didn't smile much. She chewed on the end of her pen while she reviewed the documents. She listened patiently as John laid out the situation, the inheritance, the deed, the flawed valuation. She didn't interrupt. She just took notes. When John finished, she looked up at me. I felt like she was looking right through me. Mr. Davis, she said, her voice calm and measured, it's a clear case of improper classification of assets. The land is separate property, period. She paused. The settlement agreement is based on a material mistake of fact. We can file a motion to void the settlement. I was afraid to hope. It felt dangerous. But the divorce is final. The judge signed off. The marriage is over, Mike, Sarah explained. But the financial settlement can be challenged, especially when there is evidence of negligence or fraud. Fraud? I asked. The word felt heavy, serious. Harrison had a duty to ensure the assets were properly classified. Sarah said, her voice hardening. He represents Jessica. Yes, but he also has a duty to the court. By failing to verify the status of the land, he misrepresented the marital estate. She leaned forward. Whether it was incompetence or malice, doesn't matter. He failed his duty, and frankly, Mike, I don't believe a lawyer like Harrison is incompetent. She believed it was intentional. So we can get the money back, I asked. We can try, Sarah said. It won't be easy. Harrison will fight tooth and nail. He won't want to admit he made a mistake, let alone committed fraud. She looked at John. We need more. We need to prove this wasn't just an oversight. We need to prove intent. John nodded. I'm already on it. I'm pulling the records for the sale of the garage assets. The auction records from Gary's company. I want to see who bought the land, and for how much. Good, Sarah said. Mike, you need to be prepared. This is going to get ugly. Jessica will react badly. She will use the kids against you. I knew that. I was ready. I wasn't the broken man anymore. I had a purpose. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Sarah filed the motion, citing the undisclosed non-marital asset. We were going to war. I continued working at Quick Lube. Kyle was still a jerk, but it didn't bother me anymore. I was just biding my time. Then John called me. His voice was tight with excitement. Mike, you need to come to my office. Now, what is it, John? The sale records for the land, John said. You're not going to believe this. Harrison didn't just make a mistake. He orchestrated the whole thing. I drove to John's office. He was pacing the room, agitated. Okay, so the garage assets were liquidated at auction, right? John started pulling up a document on his computer screen. The tools, the equipment, the building itself. Yeah, but the land, John continued, pointing at the screen. The land wasn't part of the auction. It was sold separately. 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized. Who bought it? I asked, my stomach twisting. I already knew the answer. I could feel it. John turned the screen towards me. I looked at the purchase agreement. The buyer was listed as Riverside Development, LLC. Riverside Development? I asked. Riverside Development? I asked. Never heard of them. Me neither, John said. It's a shell company, incorporated just days before the divorce settlement was signed. So I dug deeper. I looked up the incorporation paperwork for the LLC. He clicked a few buttons. Another document appeared, a list of partners. I scanned the names, and then I saw it. My blood ran cold. Harrison, I whispered. James P. Harrison. Yep, John said, his voice grim. Harrison bought your land. He used the liquidation to steal it from you. The pieces clicked into place. The flawed valuation, the rushed liquidation, the smirk. It was all intentional. He deliberately undervalued the business, I said, my voice shaking with rage, forced the liquidation, and planned to buy the land at a fraction of its true value. He wasn't just representing Jessica, John added. He was using her, manipulating the situation for his own gain. It was worse than I thought. It wasn't just greed. It was fraud, conspiracy. We got him, John, I said, a fierce grin spreading across my face. We got him. A few days later, while I was changing the tires on a minivan, my phone rang. It was Jessica. I hadn't spoken to her since the fight about the phone calls. My stomach tightened. I wiped the grease off my hands and answered, What do you want, Jessica? What do I want? Her voice was shrill. Panicked? I'd never heard her sound like that before. The mask was slipping. I want to know why your lawyer is harassing Harrison. Why are you doing this, Mike? Harassing, interesting choice of word. She's not harassing him, Jessica. She's correcting a mistake. A mistake? There was no mistake, Jessica insisted, her voice rising. You signed the agreement, Mike. It's done. You're just trying to drag this out because you can't accept that it's over. You're trying to ruin me. The irony was staggering. Ruin you? I laughed. A cold, hollow sound. Jessica, you took everything from me. The house, the kids, the garage. And now I find out that half of the garage wasn't even yours to take. The land, she scoffed. That dusty old lot. It was part of the business. Harrison said so. No, it wasn't, I said, my voice cold. It was mine, before you, and Harrison didn't just know it. He bought it. For himself. Silence, dead silence on the other end of the line. What are you talking about? She whispered, her voice trembling. Ask him about Riverside Development. I said. Ask your shark, who really benefited from the divorce. There was a chilling silence. I could hear her breathing. Fast. Shallow. When Jessica spoke again, her voice was low, dangerous. But the target wasn't me this time. I have to go, she said, and hung up. I knew Harrison was about to have a very bad day, but Jessica wasn't done with me yet. She proved that the next day, when she went nuclear, I got a call from Sarah. Her voice was urgent. Mike, Jessica just filed an emergency motion for sole custody. She's claiming you are unstable, harassing her, threatening her. What? That's a lie. I haven't even spoken to her since that phone call. I know, Sarah said. It's a desperate move. She realized Harrison played her, but she still wants the money. She's cornered, and she's resorting to the nuclear option. She's trying to force you to back down. The threat I feared most was happening. She was trying to take the kids away for good. The thought of losing them forever terrified me. The anger drained away, replaced by cold fear. She can't do this, Sarah. I whispered. My voice was shaking again. We won't let her, Sarah said firmly. This is a tactic, Mike. She's scared. She's trying to intimidate you into dropping the financial case. We need to stay strong. We have the evidence. The truth is on our side. I wasn't convinced. I knew Jessica. When she felt cornered, she was ruthless. She would do anything to protect herself, even sacrifice her own children. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced the small apartment. The thudding from the laundromat grated on my nerves. I was torn. Justice or my children. I almost called Sarah to drop the case. Let them have the money. It wasn't worth the risk. But then I thought about Tyler and Chloe. The strained, awkward visits. The way they looked at me. Like I was a failure. I thought about the life Jessica was building for them. A life built on greed and deception. What kind of father would I be if I let them get away with it? What example would I set if I taught them that bullies always win? I had to fight. Not just for me, but for them. I had to show them the truth. The tension mounted as the court date approached. The hearing was combined. The financial settlement and the emergency custody motion. The stakes couldn't be higher. At work, the pressure was unbearable. Kyle was riding me hard, looking for any excuse to fire me. My job was on the line, but I couldn't stop. I had to see this through. The day of the hearing arrived. I put on the only suit I owned, the one I wore at my wedding. And at the divorce trial, it felt tight, uncomfortable. I met Sarah and John outside the courtroom. Sarah looked calm, confident, ready for battle. "Remember," she whispered as we walked in. "Let me do the talking. No matter what happens, keep your composure. Don't react." We sat at the plaintiff's table. My heart was pounding in my chest. This was it, the moment of truth. A few minutes later, Jessica and Harrison entered. They were not sitting together. Jessica looked pale, nervous. She kept twisting a tissue in her hands. She wouldn't look at Harrison. Harrison looked terrible. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His eyes were bloodshot. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, twitchy energy. He looked like a rat caught in a trap. The judge entered, the same judge who had presided over the divorce, Judge Miller. My heart sank. He had already ruled against me once. The hearing began. It started with the custody motion. Harrison stood up, trying to project confidence. But his voice wavered. "Your Honor," he began, "we filed this emergency motion because Mr. Davis has engaged in a pattern of harassment and instability. He is threatening my client. We fear for the safety of the children." Sarah stood up, calm, poised. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear, "this motion is retaliatory. It was filed immediately after we uncovered significant irregularities in the financial settlement, irregularities that point to fraud." The judge looked at Harrison. "Let's address the financial matter first. Miss Jenkins, you filed a motion to void the settlement. Proceed." Sarah laid out our case, clear, concise. She presented the evidence: Grandpa Joe's will, the property deed, the inheritance before the marriage, the flawed valuation of the garage. "Your Honor," Sarah concluded, "the settlement agreement was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the marital assets. My client's separate property was wrongfully included in the distribution." Harrison stood up. He tried to rally. "Your Honor," he began, his voice smooth, practiced. "This is a desperate attempt by Mr. Davis to overturn a fair settlement. The land was clearly intended to be part of the business. It was commingled, but the deed was never transferred," Sarah countered. "Intentions don't override property law, and you know that, Mr. Harrison." "It's a technicality," Harrison dismissed with a wave of his hand. "A minor oversight, a paperwork error, a minor oversight." Sarah's voice hardened. "The land is valued at over $350,000. That is hardly minor." The judge looked skeptical. He stared at Harrison. "Mr. Harrison?" the judge asked, his voice stern. "Why was the deed not transferred? It seems like a rather large detail to overlook where an attorney of your reputation." Harrison didn't miss a beat. "It was an administrative error, Your Honor," he said smoothly. "We were focused on the larger picture. We failed to file the final transfer paperwork. An oversight, nothing more. He sounded so convincing. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed him. An administrative error, Sarah repeated, her tone dripping with sarcasm. She walked back to our table. She picked up the folder John had prepared, the one with the smoking gun. Your Honor, Sarah said, her eyes fixed on Harrison. I find it interesting that Mr. Harrison claims this was an administrative error. She paused for dramatic effect, especially since he seems to have a very personal connection to this property. Harrison froze. His face went slack. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, his voice tight. Don't you? Sarah opened the folder. She pulled out a document. This, she announced, holding it up for the whole courtroom to see, is the incorporation paperwork for a company called Riverside Development, LLC. She handed the document to the judge. The judge scanned the page, his brow furrowed. If you look at the list of partners, Your Honor, Sarah continued, her voice ringing with accusation, you will see Mr. Harrison's name. The courtroom gasped. A collective intake of breath. Harrison turned pale. He gripped the edge of the tape. And this, Sarah continued, pulling out another document. The purchase agreement is the purchase agreement for the land Mike's garage sits on, dated 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized. The buyer, Riverside Development, LLC. The realization hit the courtroom like a shockwave. It was silent, deadly silent. You weren't just liquidating the business, Mr. Harrison, Sarah said, her voice low and dangerous. You were selling the land to yourself. She walked towards him, pointing a finger. You deliberately undervalued the business, forced the liquidation, and planned to buy the land at a fraction of its true value. You knew the land was separate property, Sarah continued, her voice rising with anger. You knew Mike still owned it, but you didn't care. You saw an opportunity to enrich yourself at the expense of your client, and this court. Harrison stammered. Your Honor, this is outrageous. These are baseless accusations. I resent the implication, but the evidence was clear. The dates lined up. The conflict of interest was undeniable. The fraud was exposed. The judge stared at Harrison. His expression was thunderous. The bored look was gone, replaced by cold fury. Jessica was staring at Harrison too, her mouth open in shock, her eyes wide with disbelief. She finally realized she had been played too. The judge leaned forward. His voice was cold as ice. Mr. Harrison, he said, each word dripping with contempt, I take allegations of fraud and conflict of interest very seriously. It appears you have deliberately misled this court and engaged in highly unethical, perhaps criminal, conduct. He banged his gavel. The sound echoed in the silent courtroom. This time, it sounded like justice. The financial settlement in the matter of Davis versus Davis is hereby voided, the judge declared. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. John grabbed my shoulder, squeezing hard. Miss Jenkins, the judge continued, I want a full accounting of the marital assets, excluding the land in question, on my desk within 30 days. He then turned his attention to Jessica. She flinched. Mrs. Davis, he said, his tone. While it appears you may not have been aware of your attorney's deception, you certainly benefited from it. You negotiated in bad faith. He paused. I am ordering you to reimburse Mr. Davis for his share of the proceeds from the sale of the business assets, recalculated based on the accurate valuation, plus interest, and legal fees. Jessica burst into tears, loud, racking sobs. The composed, cold woman who had taken everything from me was now broken, but the judge wasn't finished. He addressed the custody motion. Regarding the emergency motion for sole custody, the judge said, looking at Jessica with disgust. It is denied. It is clear this motion was filed in bad faith. He looked at me now. His expression softened slightly. Furthermore, the judge continued, I am ordering an immediate review of the custody arrangement. Given the evidence of parental alienation presented during this hearing, the blocked phone calls, the poisoned visits, and the instability caused by this fraudulent settlement, I am granting Mr. Davis joint physical custody, effective immediately. Joint custody. I was getting my kids back. Tears welled up in my eyes. This time, they were tears of relief, of joy. The judge turned his gaze back to Harrison. "As for you, Mr. Harrison," the judge said, his voice laced with finality, "I will be reporting this matter to the State Bar Association. I suggest you find a good lawyer, a very good lawyer. Your career in this state is over." He banged the gavel one last time. Court adjourned. The fallout was swift and devastating. For that Harrison, facing disbarment, criminal charges for fraud, and a massive malpractice lawsuit from both me and Jessica, closed his practice. He disappeared. His reputation was destroyed. The shark had finally been neutralized. Jessica was financially ruined. She had already spent a large portion of the initial payout. The Lexus, the Disney World trip, the expensive clothes. She had to sell the house. Our house, the 4-bedroom colonial we had saved for 10 years to buy. She sold it to pay me back the money she owed. She ended up moving into a small apartment, not much bigger than the one above the laundromat. The irony was not lost on me. But I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel the urge to celebrate. I just felt tired. The victory was bittersweet. My family was still broken. The wounds were still raw. But now, we could heal. A few weeks later, I stood on the empty lot where my garage used to be. The building was still there, but it was empty, stripped bare. A hollow shell, but the land was mine. Grandpa Joe's legacy. John joined me. He handed me a cup of coffee. "So, what now?" he asked, looking around the desolate scene. I pulled the deed out of my pocket. The paper was old, brittle, but the words were clear. My future. "Now," I said, smoothing the paper over, "I rebuild." I looked across the lot. I didn't see the emptiness. I saw the possibility, a new garage, Davis & Sons Auto Repair. A new beginning. I had the money now. I hired Tony back as my first employee. We were going to be okay. That evening, I picked up Tyler and Chloe from Jessica's apartment. It was my week, our new schedule, 50-50. They were quiet at first, unsure of the new arrangement. Jessica was cold when she handed them off. She looked tired, defeated. As we drove back to my place, a new, bigger house I had rented, close to their school, Tyler started talking. "Dad," he said, looking out the window, "are you going to open a new garage?" "I am, buddy," I said, smiling, thinking of calling it Davis & Sons. Tyler looked at me, his eyes bright. "Sons? But you only have one son." "For now," I said, winking. "Maybe Chloe wants to be a mechanic too." Chloe giggled from the back seat. "I want a pink toolbox." The silence was finally broken. When we got inside, I made spaghetti, Chloe's favorite. We sat at the table, laughing, talking. The sound filled the house with warmth, with light. It wasn't the life I had planned. It was messy, complicated, far from perfect. Jessica had tried to take everything. My dignity, my future, my children. But she couldn't take who I was. A mechanic, a fighter, a father. She couldn't take my resilience, my integrity, the love I had for my children. I looked at Tyler and Chloe, their faces smeared with spaghetti sauce. And I knew I hadn't lost everything. I had just found what truly mattered. And as I watched them, I realized that sometimes the things that are forgotten, the things that are overlooked, simple piece of paperwork, a dusty old deed that a greedy lawyer overlooked, they are the things that save us. Thanks for listening to my story. It means a lot. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your time matters. Stay strong.